Hello everyone and welcome to my new video. I will cover today the topic of reading value in an object. Reading value in an object is important if you work with objects, which is very common in JavaScript. So there are two different methods. There is the dot notation and the bracket notation. The dot notation is the most used method. It allows you to read or update a property. So the signature is simple, object dot property, and the dot require the key to be a valid variable identifier. That implies no space, doesn't start with a digit, and doesn't include special character, which is the case here. So we will very simply read the value with user.id, which will return 1, or user.age, which will return 20. The second method is the bracket notation. You should use the bracket notation if the property contains spaces, digits, or a string. The signature is object between bracket between quotes property. And it's perfectly fine if you use user.id or user between bracket between quotes ID. But if you have the choice, you should opt for the first possibility since it's easier to use user.id. So here in the first example, we have spaces and a string. So you should use the bracket notation with between bracket between quotes and the property. And in the second example, we have a digit. So we will use user between bracket between quotes and the property. And finally, we have a special property called computed property. Means that a variable is a reference for a property. In the first example, we have the variable key, which is a reference of the property ID in the object. So it means that we will read the data with user between bracket between quotes ID. And since object dot property is equal to object between bracket between quotes property, this is exactly the same as doing user dot ID. In the second example, you have to first declare the variable. So key is equal to ID. Then in the object, it will means between bracket between quotes ID. And for the same equality, you can access to user.id, which will be equal to 1